Hello and welcome to this video where I'll be exploring an old copper mine in the UP. There's a lot of neat history surrounding the Victoria mine and the historical community of Old Victoria, which has been restored and can be toured today. First, I'll share with you the fascinating history of the Victoria mine, and then we'll take a trip to the Old Victoria settlement and then to the old mine site ruins. I'll do some metal detecting at the tailings pile and make something special with a piece of copper I found. It is thought that copper mining started in the Upper Peninsula following the discovery of a large copper boulder originally found by Native Americans near where the Victoria mine was built hundreds of years later. This huge copper boulder is called the Ontonagan boulder and weighs 3,708 pounds. While the exact origin of the Ontonagan boulder is unknown, it has been determined that the boulder was dragged about 20 miles by a glacier from Lake Superior down the Ontonagan River toward Victoria. Copper boulder was originally discovered by the Ojibwa people who used it in spiritual ceremonies. Native Americans are thought to have used more primitive and yet more natural ways of copper mining for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the area. In the 1600s, the native people shared information about the copper with white missionaries. The copper boulder became a pilgrimage site for many European explorers to the region. It inspired the earliest mining ventures in Michigan. The history of the Ontonagan copper boulder is posted on a sign near Victoria. The Ontonagan copper boulder was found on the banks of the Ontonagan River near this site. Members of the Ojibwa tribe first knew about the existence of the copper boulder. The French Jesuits learned of the existence of the boulder in the late 1600s. Alexander Henry, an English adventurer and fur trader, ventured up the Ontonagan River to see the copper boulder in the early summer of 1766. In 1771 to 1772, an English company under Alexander Henry unsuccessfully attempted early copper mining on the riverbank near the copper boulder. The copper boulder was removed from the site in early 1843. Accounts vary as to who removed it. Both James K. Paul and Julius Eldred claim to have removed it. Julius Eldred ended up with possession of the boulder long enough to display it in Detroit for less than a month, charging 25 cents to view it. In November of 1843, the United States government took permanent possession of the Ontonagan copper boulder, transporting it to Washington, D.C., where it was placed in the yard of the War Department. The Ontonagan copper boulder, a mass of pure copper weighing 3,708 pounds, was moved to the Smithsonian Institute in 1858. It is one of the earliest pieces in the collection of the Natural History Museum of the Smithsonian Institution. Today, the copper boulder is in storage at the Smithsonian and has not been displayed for over 30 years. In 1955, there was a request made to the Smithsonian to return the boulder to the area, which was denied, but the Smithsonian manufactured an exact replica of the boulder and sent it to Ontonagan, which is about 20 miles from Victoria. For several years, the replica boulder was kept on display outdoors in front of the Ontonagan County Museum, but eventually the replica was moved inside to the current museum location, now called the Ontonagan Historical Museum. For a short time in 1987, the Ontonagan boulder was exhibited at Michigan Tech's A.E. Seaman Mineralogical Museum in Houghton as part of a centennial celebration. The Keweenaw Indian Bay community of the Ojibwa Nation, who have treaty rights in the area where the boulder was found, have been appealing to have the boulder returned to them. The last time they appealed for the return of the copper boulder was in 1991, and their request was denied. Early white explorers in the 1600s began searching for the source of the copper in the area, which led to the discovery of a large vein of copper in the eastern Upper Peninsula. Eventually, over 100 copper mines opened in the 1800s in the UP, including the Victoria Copper Mine, which was established in 1849. Copper was found at the site of the Victoria mine, but it wasn't until the 1800s that copper mines began opening in the UP. Initially, the site where Victoria is was not successful due to its mountainous location, and other mines had failed to make good of it at the site, including the Cushion and Forest Hill mines. Eventually, the mine was reorganized and reestablished as the Victorian Mine in 1849, named after Queen Victoria. The Victoria mine was dug into a pit where prehistoric tools had been discovered, and it was realized to be an ancient mining attempt by Native Americans. The mine faced many difficulties, including a large fire that burned its buildings down, and at one point buildings were built closer to the Ontonagan River, but those were swept away by a flood. Eventually, a British mining captain, Thomas Hooper, was hired to get the mine on track. In 1899, he began efforts to use a hydraulic air compressor to harness the power of the Ontonagan River to power the Victoria mine. The compressor had to be built 375 feet under the ground. A dam was built to direct the water into the compressor. With the compressor, the mine had no fuel costs. A compressed air locomotive train was created to move ore to the mill on the river. A sawmill was built at the Victoria mine to provide essential materials for the copper mining operation and the village that grew around it. The mill's primary functions were to create timbers for mine shaft supports and to provide wood for fuel. The lumber was also used for supplying thousands of timbers needed for mine stability. Copper mines were prone to collapse without proper reinforcement. The sawmills supplied the thousands of timbers needed to support the mine shafts, tunnels, and other underground structures. Wood was also needed to supply lumber for the numerous buildings that made up the company town of Victoria, including homes for miners, boarding houses, offices, and a store. Soon after the mine was dug, work was started on a settlement for the workers. Log bunkhouses were built for the workers of the mine and sawmill at Victoria. Other company buildings were constructed, including the company office, which housed the supply store, and the home of the company agent. Company houses were built for workers with families. A two-room school was built, as well as a communal sauna. The company store included a post office, a butcher shop, and a supply storage. The supply house was used for dances, movies, and other entertainment. The town grew and eventually thrived as a company town. This meant that the company owned the houses and the stores. Anything needed was provided by the company, and any money owed was taken directly from the paychecks. This system worked for the benefit of the company, and the workers were underpaid, and it was hard for them to get out of debt. Victoria got its post office in 1899. By 1905, the population was 400, and there was a general store and a doctor. By 1910, there was a saloon, and the population was 360. A great number of them were Finnish, which was common in the area. By 1917, Victoria's population had peaked at 700. At its peak, 250 men worked at the Victoria mine. Many were immigrants. Married men lived with their families in 70 houses built by the company. Single men boarded with families or in the big company boarding house. Through the years, the Victoria mine faced difficulties early on and closed and opened a few times for economic reasons. The mine produced about 10,000 tons of copper before closing in 1921 due to a fall in copper prices. After the abandonment of the town site, the Victoria houses were rented out, sold, torn down, or fell victim to vandals and nature. The town Victoria became a ghost town. The Society for the Restoration of Old Victoria was formed in 1974 to restore the buildings. The Old Victoria Restoration Site covers 45 acres and includes both log cabin locations built by the Victoria Copper Mine Company in 1899. The 4 cabins, now known as Old Victoria, were restored on their original foundations using logs original to that cabin, as well as replacement logs from the cabins at the sawmill location. The site opened as a museum on July 4, 1976, and has been open every summer day since then. Funding is provided by tours, fees, donations, and sales of cinnamon rolls at annual events. Now let's hike back to the old mine site where we'll see rock foundations of buildings, the hoist house, and the tailings pile, which is rock debris from mining that can still contain copper today. A 175 years after the mine was established, the beautiful Victoria Mine Hoist House miraculously still stands in fairly intact condition. Copper mine hoist houses were structures that contained the machinery to operate the mine. This large hoist machinery was used to lift copper ore, rock, and miners from underground shafts to the surface. These buildings housed the immense engines and drums that operated the cables, allowing for the rapid and efficient movement of materials and personnel to great depths. Close to the hoist house is a large tailings pile which consists of discarded basalt rock, some of which can include copper. I spent some time metal detecting at the tailings pile at Victoria Mine. Normally I would also be using a pointer to be more specific about where the copper was after being alerted by the metal detector, which is not as specific. But unfortunately, despite checking my pointer that morning and changing the battery, the pointer failed to work. Despite not being able to use a pointer, I found a decent-sized rock formation containing copper in the tailings pile. After I busted up the larger basalt rock with a sledgehammer, I had 3 pieces of copper. If there's any. Now let's go to the Victoria Dam site, just a mile from Old Victoria. The Taylor air compressor ran for the last time in 1951. After the completion of the dam, the town site was again abandoned. A new Victoria Dam was built in 1995 and created the artificial lake called the Victoria Flowage. Hooper Dam and the Taylor compressor now lay submerged in that lake. A section of the old wooden pipeline is still on display at the dam. The wooden pipeline was 10 feet in diameter, held together with 72,000 steel bands, and supported by concrete saddles every 10 feet along its length. If the wood staves in it were placed to and fro, they would stretch 84 miles. A plaque includes the following information. In the fall of 1929, just before the great stock market crash, work began on the Victoria Mine development. In January 1931, the facility was placed in commercial operation to provide energy for the area's copper mining and forest products industries. Today's Victoria is the third dam on this stretch of the Ontonagan, and in 1902, Hooper's Dam was built upstream in what is now the reservoir. It diverted water to the Taylor air compressor to produce energy for the Victoria Mining Company. In 1930, the original Victoria Dam, a concrete, multiple arch buttress-like structure, was built at the falls. In 1991, it was replaced by the existing roller compacted concrete grade stepped face dam. There has also been 3 pipelines at Victoria. The original 1930 Redwood pipeline was replaced with one of Douglas fir. An actual section of the Douglas fir pipeline was saved and is on display here. In over 40 years, the waters of the south and west branches of the Ontonagan River flowed through the cylinder of wood on their way to Lake Superior. In 2001, the present spiral welded steel pipeline was built to replace the wooden structure, which had reached the end of its life cycle. The reservoir, the dam, the pipeline, and the powerhouse are all integral parts of the station's generating systems. Victoria operates as a run-of-the-river facility, meaning whatever flows into the reservoir flows out at approximately the same rate, either through the spill gates or through the pipeline. The Victoria Dam's water flow flows the strongest during the spring melt and after heavy rains, and is best seen roaring in late winter or early spring. Now I'll show you what I did with the copper I found at the Victoria mine. First, I soaked the pieces in muriatic acid to get some of the excess rock off. I then used a rock tumbler to get more rock off and smooth out the copper. First, I used 80 grit silicone carbide and ceramic media. You can see here the approximate total weight of the copper I got was 0.90 pounds. It's relatively heavy. The largest piece was 0.58, the next largest 0.24, and the smallest 0.04. The size and weight of the copper will go down a bit after more of the rock comes off with tumbling. Next, I tumbled the copper in aluminum and tin oxide for more polish and shine. After all this, the smaller piece of copper dissolved into a tiny piece, so I ended up with 2 good-sized pieces of copper. After the oxide tumble for a few days, I rinsed the copper pieces off well with water. Finally, I soaked the 2 pieces in Tarnex just for a few minutes for some shine. The smaller piece I used to make a refrigerator magnet, which turned out great and even roughly resembles the shape of the UP.